Lousy invoice practices can insidiously eat away at the profitability of any organization, and there are so many of them. In this episode, we look at 10 of the more common ones. Make sure you stick around until the end when we identify the real doozy. Practice number 1, not having a single email address for the receipt of all emailed invoices. This means that you either let your vendors email invoices to whoever they want, and you don't try and centralize the electronic receipt. This increases your chances of getting several copies of the same invoice. It creates delays. Delays mean you probably have a chance of losing early payment discounts. And also, if you're getting multiple copies, it increases your chances of making a duplicate payment. And it increases work, okay, which is never a good thing. Lousy practice number 2. Invoice receipt is not centralized, not only on email, but you should also have one physical address for folks to send their invoices and also one fax number. If you don't centralize the receipt of invoices, just like electronically, you're going to have a delay in receiving, you're going to lose early payment discounts, you're going to have extra work, late fees, and then if this is delayed, there's a good chance the vendor will send a second invoice, which occasionally means a second payment. Okay. Lousy practice number 3. Your invoice processors are also entering data into the master vendor file. This can be setting up new vendors, or it can be changing information about existing vendors, either the bank account number, the address, etc. This is a weak internal control. It will mean you don't have appropriate segregation of duties. And anytime you have a situation like that, it also increases your chances of fraud. So you want to make sure you have appropriate separation of duties. Okay, bad invoice practice number 4, let me make that clear, is not verifying those change of bank account requests that you receive by email. Yes, I know it's a lot of work, but it's something that you need to do. Every organization needs to do, because maybe 1 out of 100 of those will be phony. And the problem with 1 out of 100 doesn't sound bad, but if that one is for a $2 million payment, you can see what the problem is. So yes, we have to do that. You might think that everybody is doing that now, but from some of the preliminary polling that we've done here at AP Now, we find that yes, 80% of the companies are verifying all these change of address requests, but that means 20% of them aren't. And yes, I can't emphasize this enough. Yes, when you call, the odds are it was a legitimate request, but there's always that chance, that 1 in 100 chance that it's not, and then, big bucks out the door. All right. The next one may not seem like a bad practice or a weak practice, but if you don't employ it, you're going to have a lot of extra work in your accounts payable function, and that, of course, means that you'll be less efficient than you should. And that is when you have an invoice that comes in without a purchase order number on it. Instead of going around trying to figure out who sent you this invoice, you want to return it to the vendor, okay? So weak practice, not returning invoices without purchase order numbers. It wastes time. It also increases your chance that you're going to match it against the wrong purchase order. And of course, that leads to other problems. All right. Before we get to the next 5, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to this channel. It's free, completely private, and you can unsubscribe at any time. By ringing that bell next to the subscribe button, if you're on YouTube, you'll also be notified when we post new accounts payable content, which we do 2 or 3 times a week. And by the way, you don't need a YouTube account to subscribe. You can subscribe if you have a Gmail account. I didn't know that, so. Okay, moving back to our lousy invoice practices. Lousy invoice practice number 6 is not having a mandatory vacation policy. Anyone who works in actually any department that has anything to do with your money, and of course accounts payable is definitely one of them, should have a mandatory vacation policy requiring each person to take 5 consecutive days off, during which their job is performed by somebody else. Letting them to do it from home doesn't solve the problem. Why? Well, forgetting all the HR implications, because we're not here to talk about HR, we're here to talk about invoices and accounts payable issues, but not having people take 5 days off increases your chances of fraud. If you have an employee who is playing games, the feeling is that if it's an ongoing fraud, and they're out of the office for 5 days, during that 5 days, you'll be able to uncover the fraud. The fraud will unravel and you'll find it. Now, I know this is a practice in use in very, very few companies. I had one manager tell me that their problem wasn't getting their people to take all their vacation, but people who wanted to take additional time. And I understand that, but it's just to address the issue of that one person. So it should be part of your policy. And this is one of those areas, one of those many areas actually, where you might want to get HR involved. Okay, next issue I want to talk about is printing invoices for data entry. We've made great strides, if you will, in a digital transformation, getting away from paper, in that most of our members and people in the community now report that they get the majority of their invoices by email. This is great. But you give back some of those savings if your processes then turn around and print the invoice in order to do the data entry. One way to get around this is to make sure that each of your processes has two screens, so the invoice can be on one and then do the data entry on the other form. It's easy to understand if you have folks trying to do data entry on, for example, a laptop, why it might be much easier if they print out the invoice. But forgetting the impact on the environment of paper and all that, it's just an inefficient way. It's an extra step that you don't have to take. Lousy practice number 8, not having standardized invoice processing routines. This increases your chances of entering a duplicate invoice and then after that making a duplicate payment. You want to have standardized invoice practices so that if an invoice comes in today and you process it, and then that same invoice, a copy of it, comes in 2 weeks from now and it's not labeled copy, because these days nothing's labeled copy or second invoice or anything of that nature, and I go to process it, if I use the same steps as you're using, then there's a good chance that I'll identify it as a duplicate and throw it out. The earlier in the game you can identify those duplicate invoices, the less work you waste on them, the more efficient your accounts payable function will be. Lousy invoice practice number 8, and I'm thinking that more than a few people fall into this one, and that is not periodically checking how your processes are processing your invoices to make sure not only that they're doing it correctly, but that they haven't introduced any shortcuts. Sometimes a processor will come up with a shortcut. It may be a good shortcut, and if it's a shortcut that's good, then everybody should be using it. You shouldn't just have the one person using it. But sometimes it does make their life a little bit easier, but it creates a problem or additional work for somebody else down the line. So you want to make sure that that doesn't happen. So by sitting with your processors periodically, and by periodically I mean once or twice a year, maybe for a half an hour or an hour, just to see what they're doing, you can identify these situations. And by the way, occasionally they may come up with a good idea and they can, help make you more efficient. Okay, now as promised, the real doozy is left for number 10. And number 10 is not having a coding standard for data entry. And by the way, when you're sitting with your processes to make sure that they're doing things the way you want them to do, as we discussed in step 9, one of the things you want to check is to make sure they're using your coding standards exactly as it's been given to them. This is one of those areas where, do as I say, don't be creative. If you can get everybody to use this coding standard that you've created for data entry, you will greatly reduce your number of errors and duplicate payments. It's the single number one best way to protect against making duplicate payments. So hopefully you have a coding standard. Number one, have the coding standard and make sure that your people are using it, okay? Because that's the other biggie. It's, not great if you've created this standard, then people come up with their own shortcuts. Can you identify any other weak practices? If so, please share them in the comments section below. Along the same lines, in episode 84 of the AP Now podcast, we discuss the often overlooked no-cost, I love the no-cost, fraud controls. On YouTube, a link will appear to it at the left. And as always, I greatly appreciate those thumbs up, those comments, those shares and subscribes. Good luck, everyone.